Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A Burnaby-based anti-drone company sues a former worker over fears he may have shared confidential information that could threaten national security. Plus,
that would be very stressful for me personally, just because I don't do good in mornings.
Some Burnaby High School students may have their schedules upended because of overcrowding.
This is a problem with how schools are built at the provincial level.
And
I really couldn't have afforded it not to drop.
The Bank of Canada's interest rate cut is welcome news for some mortgage holders and would-be buyers.
It's giving people a little bit more sort of encouragement to actually step up and make offers.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A Burnaby-based anti-drone company is now suing a former employee over fears he may have shared confidential information that could threaten national security. As Jason Proctor reports, a BC judge issued an order used to seize the man's electronic devices last month.
This legal battle all happened behind closed doors until this week, and it basically pulls the curtain back on the incredibly competitive world of anti-drone technology. There is a company based in Burnaby called Skycope, which is a world leader in this technology that allows people to identify the frequencies and protocols that allow drones to fly. And so what Skycope have done is build what they call a drone library containing the frequencies of about 450 different types of drones that allow them to identify them and essentially knock them out of the sky. And so what happens in August, an engineer with the company says he's resigning. That sparks alarm bells for the CEO, who says he wants to sit down and discuss why is he leaving. The guy tells him it's for money and he's not going to another anti-drone company, which, according to these court documents, the CEO finds suspicious. So he goes through the guy's workspace at some point and finds his personal email up and allegedly finds that he's been in contact with a foreign competitor based out of Abu Dhabi. And so that's how this ends up in the courts, because Skycope claims that this man has been sharing confidential information, including information about drones given by the Canada's Defense Department to this competitor, and there are fears for national security because an expert on national security says China's and Russia's militaries may be interested in this information. Based on that, an order is given to seize the man's electronic devices. It happens in a forum where the man is not there. And so the first thing he knows about this lawsuit and the order is when 9 people, including bailiffs, lawyers, and people from the company, show up on his doorstep and seize all of his phones. I spoke to his lawyer. He says he's committed no wrongdoing and had no intention of committing any wrongdoing. A lawyer for Skycope told me the military and the police have not been informed of this because the whole thing was sealed up until now. But of course, it's now in the public domain, so they can act as they want. Jason Proctor, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Burnaby School District, meanwhile, is warning some high schools could move to staggered class scheduling next school year. That is because increased enrollment is creating a serious space crunch. More now from Karen Larson.
A Cole Alpha Secondary in North Burnaby is one of 5 high schools in the city that could be moving to a staggered schedule because of overcrowding. A staggered schedule means students won't all attend at the same time, with the school day starting earlier and ending later in order to add an additional block of classes. For some, that could mean starting as early as 8 in the morning.
That would be very stressful for me personally, just because I don't do good in mornings. Like, I don't even have a first period.
I've just been hearing a lot of grade 8s complain about this because most of them stay up till 1, 2.
And like teenagers out of every age group need the most sleep statistically. So it's actually better for school to start at like 9 for teenagers than actually earlier.
With the explosion of residential high-rises at nearby Brentwood, Alpha is bursting at the seams. The school was upgraded in 2019, but not built nearly big enough. It's the same thing down the road at Burnaby North Secondary, home of the Vikings, and possibly the new staggered schedule. Burnaby North was over capacity the first day it opened in January after extensive upgrades.
We've been seeing the problem growing.
The chair of the Burnaby District Parent Advisory Council says staggered schedules create all sorts of potential issues.
Concerns around how is it going to affect extracurricular activities? How is it going to affect families when you've got multiple children and one starting at one time, one starting at another?
Every Burnaby Familyville High School student got this letter today.
This Burnaby PAC member took to social media to highlight the proposal. He says schools will only become even more overcrowded without a change in planning.
This isn't really a school district problem or even a school board problem. This is a problem with how schools are built at the provincial level.
Burnaby School Superintendent Karim Hashleff was not available for an interview. In a statement, he says the pace of growth at many of our high schools is such that we can't wait to build ourselves out of the capacity issues. Karen Larson, CBC News, Burnaby.
The Kamloops Thompson School District, meanwhile, is looking at job cuts as it tries to recover from a more than $2 million deficit because of an accounting error. Superintendent Rhonda Nixon says the error happened when a piece of revenue was counted twice. A budget reduction plan outlined in September saw reduced supplies and increased fees for field trips. But Nixon says that was not enough and job cuts are necessary. She didn't give a specific number of staff laid off and says the cuts are not affecting the classrooms directly. The Kamloops Thompson Teachers Association says they are pleased with the outcome. To BC politics now, Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau is staying tight-lipped after Saturday's razor-thin election, revealing little about her party's plans to possibly prop up a minority government. She does say she spoke with NDP leader David Eby.
Could you give a sense of what the conversation with David Eby was like this morning?
It was a conversation.
Oh, come on.
Furstenau lost in a new running, but plans to stay on as party leader for now, while she declined to say how much more until the final vote tallies are in. She says she did not answer the phone when Conservative leader John Rustad called, saying she didn't recognize the number. She admits she has concerns about his party.
There have been statements made by Conservative candidates that are truly disturbing. Racist, dehumanizing, homophobic, and conspiratorial. Some of these candidates have been elected, and I have yet to see a satisfactory response from John Rustad around this.
The NDP are leading or elected in 46 seats, the Conservatives at 45, and the Greens in 2. In 2017, the Greens under then leader Andrew Weaver formed a confidence and supply agreement with the NDP that made John Horgan premier. In 2020, though, Horgan called a snap election, claiming the Greens had broken a rule of their deal by introducing a government bill without notification. Horgan then won a commanding majority. The province's police watchdog has been called in after Mountie shot and killed a man in Penticton on Tuesday. The RCMP says a man was acting erratically and reportedly holding a knife on Government Street just after 3 in the afternoon. The Independent Investigations Office says an officer was hurt while trying to arrest him and shot the man. He was taken to hospital and later died. The officer was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. The IIO is asking anyone with video footage or other information to contact them. 2 years ago, after he was elected, Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim committed to hiring 100 more mental health nurses for the city. But putting that promise into action has not been that straightforward. As Chad Pawson explains, as of now, 35 extra mental health workers have been hired, and he has more on why those numbers have changed.
The good news is there are more mental health workers on Vancouver's streets to more adequately respond to people in crisis and help reduce social disorder. It's just not the 100 mental health nurses that the government here at City Hall promised 2 years ago.
And I think context is important. So the idea was bringing in 100 mental health nurses to help, and we left it to the experts. The experts came back and they said a better plan would be 58 individuals in a whole bunch of different categories.
The political promise of 100 nurses has changed. First whittled down to 58 positions and now actually 55, and only 35 of those positions filled at this point. The aim with these hires is for a more targeted and more diverse approach, despite the numbers being lower than promised. Sure, police response teams paired with nurses have been expanded, but there's also a mobile crisis de-escalation team that now has 14 workers, with a further 18 to be hired, and there's a unique unique Indigenous crisis response team. It has 9 staff with health and cultural workers able to provide a holistic and non-police response. Architects from Vancouver Coastal Health say the more nuanced way is making a difference, that healthcare workers across disciplines on Vancouver streets were important and needed compared to a critical mass of nurses. Outreach workers in Vancouver's downtown east side say they aren't surprised that the 100 mental health nurses did not happen. They say it was never feasible, but hope the current path connects people with the services they desperately need. Mayor Ken Sim says although it's not his election promise, it's a collaborative approach uniquely tailored for the city's needs, something his council is willing to put up to $8 million a year behind.
I think this has gone incredibly well. The Health Authority has the resources and the commitment from the city that we've never wavered on, and they are making a huge impact.
So what next? Well, the mobile de-escalation team needs to keep hiring to fill gaps such as being able to respond on weekends. Also expected in the new year, a more fulsome evaluation of the entire program, which will include feedback from clients and how they felt about how it helped them. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Mondavi is here with a look at the weather, and there'll be some snow falling in BC.
Yes, there is. We had some snow earlier in the central interior. That is expected to taper off as we head later into the night and into tomorrow. If you take a look at the south coast, things are nothing but calm here. We're not expecting to see any significant precipitation until Friday overnight into Saturday, which you can take a look at here. Some more showers, maybe some flurries at higher elevations will continue to pop up on parts of the south coast tonight and into tomorrow. But here in Vancouver, don't expect to be wet. Maybe a shower possible in the Fraser Valley, but you can see Friday is when we really start to see that precipitation come in. Will be heavy at times and in some places, but it doesn't seem like the precipitation amounts will be too high. The big thing here for Metro Vancouver, at least, and for Victoria, is probably going to be those winds. It's looking quite gusty as we get into overnight Friday into Saturday and maybe into Saturday morning. But again, for tonight, Dan, mostly calm conditions, maybe a little bit more snow in the Caribou.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The City of Vancouver says it will shut down its only sanctioned homeless encampment by early next month. The designated area has been in place since 2022. And as Liam Britton explains, one of the few remaining campers there says he has few options to come indoors safely.
Now's the time to come to a closure.
Vancouver Park Board manager Steve Jackson says after 3+ years, the Crab Park camp is a safety hazard for people living there and a barrier to the broader community's enjoyment of the waterfront park.
Why are you doing it this way? And then they set up the media. Yeah, I don't know. It's, every time I think, maybe it'll be cool this time, they keep disappointing, which really sucks.
Well, they did say in the meeting several times about...
In just 2 weeks, the city hopes to have closed the encampment. It says 7 people still live there. They've been offered housing, but have mostly refused.
With one person having refused 3 offers. Just last week, a very, very good housing offer was refused, and we were quite disappointed.
Sasha Cristiano is one of those few remaining residents. He claims he's never been offered housing, and even so, he doesn't want to live in an SRO.
It's a sour environment for anybody. Anybody who wants to get clean. A lot of my friends, they relapsed, and then a couple of them died.
The officials claim some advocates are influencing people not to accept housing offers. They're urging those advocates to help get the campers indoors.
Our hope is that that doesn't continue, and that they work to support people to come inside.
Would you accept the housing offers that are being given to us?
Absolutely, yeah.
Fiona York, a longtime Crab Park advocate, called that accusation false, adding it detracts from a deeper issue of adequate housing for marginalized communities. Now, this won't be the city's first attempt to end the long-running homeless camp, which is just the latest example of such camps in a city and a province facing an ongoing homeless crisis. It first arose with about 100 people in the spring of 2021. Months later, the city issued eviction orders, but a Supreme Court judge said no, finding the city was unreasonable to assume campers could find suitable indoor housing if kicked out of the park. Since 2022, the encampment has been confined to a smaller, designated area of the park. Jackson and Singh say even once this next eviction order takes effect, ideally by November 7th, nighttime tenting will still be allowed, a right established by the courts. York called the eviction announcement, quote, deplorable and reprehensible, but not surprising. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The biggest rate drop since the pandemic, what it means for big purchases, and might there be more cuts to come? That's next. Vancouver firefighters are getting new PFAS-free gear. PFSAs are a toxic group of chemicals known to cause many health complications, including cancer. Crews say the previous gear was not PFAS-free.
Our firefighters are at risk every single day from the job that they do, from going into the fires, from the smoke, from the toxics, from the shift work, and the gear that they're wearing also contributes to that.
Fry says in the last 7 years, 34 firefighters have died because of occupational cancer. The city has spent almost $3 million on the new gear. The Bank of Canada is dropping its trend-setting interest rate again, this time cutting it by ½ a percentage point rather than the usual quarter. It's welcome news for anyone with a variable rate mortgage. But as Anis Haydari reports, experts are on alert for other economic issues.
The Bank of Canada is picking up the pace, making a big cut to its key rate.
We took a bigger step today because inflation is now back to the 2% target, and we want to keep it close to the target.
The central bank's interest rate down by half a percentage point to 3.75%, attempting to ensure the economy doesn't cool off too much.
We need demand to strengthen, take up the slack.
For one thing, lower interest rates can make mortgages cheaper, freeing up money to spend elsewhere.
I've seen a drop of around $200, $300 monthly, which adds up to my budget, and I'm able to allocate money wherein I would previously think twice.
But high rates affect more than just mortgages.
So I believe if interest rates don't go back to sustainable levels, we're going to struggle in the long run.
Well, we're not even at neutral.
Some economists say the Bank of Canada needed to move faster.
And clearly, the softening in labor market is probably a big surprise to them. The speed at which it has softened, but also the speed at which inflation has come down.
And saying they should have cut more before the U.S. election, because Americans can drastically affect Canada's economy too.
What happens in the U.S. will be a primary driver on whether or not we slow down more than what's expected in the Bank of Canada's forecast in 2025.
With economic growth already slow, the central bank will be watching how Canadians and Canadian businesses start spending before making their next decision in early December. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Well, as we said, that rate cut is welcome news to some mortgage holders and would-be buyers here in BC. As Michelle Gassoub explains, the real estate industry is also hoping it will bump up sales that have slumped for months.
A 50 basis point slash from the Bank of Canada, making borrowing a little less scary this fall, and rates a little friendlier for mortgage holders.
Yeah, it's welcome. I renew in July, so I was happy to see that because I really couldn't have afforded it not to drop.
From 4.25 to 3.75%, this cut is the biggest in 4 years. And in BC, Canada's most expensive province, every penny counts.
People who are in that situation will see a relief of $30 per month per 100,000 that they owe. So, let's say there's a family with a $500,000 mortgage, they're going to feel $150 a month less per payment.
That drop also means more would-be buyers could become first-time owners.
This interest rate decrease does offer somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000 of extra buying power for people looking to enter the market. That's not a little number. That will help somebody on the sidelines get into their first apartment or condo or townhouse.
Over the past years, sales have slumped. But will this series of cuts turn that around or even ignite a red-hot market?
I don't like to fear-monger people and say, oh my God, you got to run out and buy today because next year the prices are going to be 10, 15% higher. I think that what we're seeing is just a moderation of sales activity. It's giving people a little bit more sort of encouragement to actually step up and make offers.
The Bank of Canada is expected to make more cuts, and in expensive BC, some say the rate needs to come down even more.
Probably it's a point away from a more realistic financial situation, on the positive side.
Still, welcome news as rates continue to fall. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A look at the day that was in White Rock, a sunny, gorgeous fall day. Plenty of people enjoying the seaside and Canada's longest pier, don't you know? Darius Madavi will be back with his BC-wide weather forecast after the break. Coquitlam search and rescue crews say they're working with BC Hydro to lower the outflow of the dam into the Coquitlam River as they try to find a man believed to have fallen into the surging water on Sunday. They say a big push in rescue operations will come on Friday.
We will have had by Friday, 3 or 4 days of no rain, and there is heavy rain forecast for Saturday. So Friday is really our make or break day. We're going to have swiftwater technicians from Coquitlam SAR and from Ridge Meadows SAR will be in the river. So that will be, as up close and personal as we can get in terms of searching for Robert.
McDonald says the water conditions have improved over the last few days, but remain treacherous. Coquitlam Mounties say Robert Belding was last seen near Pipeline Road and Galette Avenue around 5 p.m. on Sunday. Rescuers think Belding was trying to save a dog from the river, which was surging after heavy rain from the atmospheric river. And we're learning more about one of the 3 British Columbians confirmed dead after that torrential rain swept over the south coast. Teacher Sonia McIntyre was killed after her Coquitlam home was washed away in a mudslide. McIntyre taught at Aspenwood Elementary School in nearby Port Moody. One of her former students says she is stunned to hear of her former teacher's death.
Remember, she was the only teacher I'd ever accidentally called mom, which was, we laughed about it, but it was just so crazy, and I can't believe that happened. She also taught my younger brother and sister, and we all just adored her, and she was an amazing teacher to all of us. And had a lasting impact on all of her students. I remember a time that we were all painting and I had darker skin than everyone in the class, and she went out of her way to make sure I had paint that was good for my skin color, and I thought that was really special. She's inspired me in my adult life to be the best version of myself and keep following my dreams. I had always wanted to be a baker, so she encouraged me to keep baking and gave me positive feedback with that. Although it's not what I'm doing right now, I'm in marketing and real estate, but that's kind of something that I've kept with me, just keep going.
As we know, BC is no stranger to extreme weather from that atmospheric river we've been reporting on that we experienced on the weekend. 2 deadly heat domes. You may have also heard phrases like polar vortex and bomb cyclone being used by experts. But why did we start using these phrases, and when did we simply stop calling it a cold spell, for example? Time to bring in our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi. Darius, first of all, what are some of the common phrases that we just mentioned? What do they actually mean?
Well, since you mentioned it, let's start with atmospheric rivers. Now, I often see people saying, we used to just call them a pineapple express, but a pineapple express is actually a subset of atmospheric river, one that specifically comes from the tropics near Hawaii. Atmospheric rivers are really exactly what they sound like. Narrow, relatively narrow in atmospheric terms, stream of moisture moving through the atmosphere. Now, the west coast is often hit hard by them because that moisture hits the mountains and falls out as rain or snow. Now, a bomb cyclone is a similar case. It's defined as a storm whose pressure drops 24 millibars in under 24 hours. Very exciting. A heat dome is a little bit different since it doesn't really have a formal meteorological definition, but it's generally used to refer to particularly stubborn and stifling summer high-pressure systems that trap heat under them. And lastly, polar vortex. This one is a separate case, since it is virtually never used properly in the media. The polar vortexes are actually always present, high up in the stratosphere over both poles, and they only indirectly affect our weather. So if you hear someone say a polar vortex is coming, they generally mean there's Arctic air moving south.
Okay. Where do these terms come from, and why might it seem like they've sort of entered our vocabulary in the last few years?
Right, so the term atmospheric river has existed in meteorological circles since the early 1990s. Bomb cyclone was formally defined in the 80s, although fast-developing storms have been called bombs since the 40s. Heat dome first took off in 2011, according to a New York Times investigation, and polar vortex dates back to at least the 1950s, but it entered the public zeitgeist just around 10 years ago. Now, especially here in BC, it feels like most of these terms have really taken hold in just the last few years. I asked Gina Esco, an expert with the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, why that might be.
I think that with a changing communication landscape, there is more time and opportunity to interact. And with more time means more content. And so more content means we have more opportunity to share information that before we were so limited, right, that we stuck with plain language because it was more efficient time-wise. And now with more time to converse, we can have deeper conversations about the weather and environment around us.
And can I just say, as someone who loves the science side of this job, I'm grateful for that extra time.
No kidding. We are too. Do these terms actually, do you think, help the public understand the weather and the changes we're experiencing?
I put that same question to Esko because her team is always working to find better ways to communicate about the weather, especially extreme weather. She says it really comes down to how you're using the term.
You want to make sure that you're not using it, for example, as a fear appeal only. Fear appeals don't always work. That is to say that sometimes really communicating that the fear of an event can sometimes help people perceive risk. With that said, a lot of the research shows that it can boomerang. That is to say, instead of it increasing risk, it actually increases worry and concern, and they don't really know what to do.
So if you're just sticking bomb cyclone in a headline to get clicks, that's probably not helpful. But unfortunately, we see that all too often. So I asked Esko whether the better scientific understanding among some of the public is worth the trade-off.
It's complex. I think that where there is misinformation or possible misuse of the term, I think that what can be done is to reiterate what the term is, what the meaning is, and provide more context. There will always be other interpretations.
Now, as with anything that's poorly understood, these terms are ripe for misinformation, intentional or otherwise. And that's especially important here in BC, where terms like atmospheric river and heat dome are, for good reason, quite charged. But these terms aren't going anywhere. The cat is out of the bag. So the only thing left to do is help people understand what they mean when we use them, the definition of the term, how it relates to the forecast, and what people should do to keep themselves safe. It's important because the language we use is powerful. And Dan, whoever said talking about the weather is boring?
Certainly not my colleague. Darius Madavi, thanks very much. We'll check back in later. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under more pressure than ever to step down, and it's coming from inside his own party. Now those trying to oust Trudeau have given him an ultimatum. Ashley Burke reports.
The Liberal Party is strong and united.
The party may be united, but not necessarily behind its current leader.
We need change, but...
Liberal MP Wayne Long among those calling on Justin Trudeau to step down.
Liberal Party is an institution in this country. It's bigger than one person, one leader.
He's among 24 Liberal MPs who sources say signed a letter calling on Trudeau to go. And that today an MP read out a document at caucus that says Trudeau has until Monday to decide if he'll leave.
Do you think the Prime Minister should stay?
It's not up to me. It's up to him.
The Prime Minister will make a decision, and he will, whatever the decision is, we will stand behind him.
During that private meeting, Liberal MPs say as many as 20 of their colleagues voiced concerns about the Prime Minister, while others stood behind him.
We heard a lot. You know, over, I'd say 50 or so people spoke. We heard every angle, every aspect of this. And what it's left us with is something to go away and think about.
Liberal MPs told CBC News the Prime Minister listened and said he would reflect on what caucus told him. But Trudeau told his MPs he wasn't convinced he had to go.
He's quite clear about his intentions, and I don't expect those to change.
My colleagues need to turn the knives outwards and not inwards, and we need to focus on the most important thing, which is getting things done here in Parliament and taking the fight to Pierre Poilievre, because he's a disaster for this country.
The Conservatives seizing on the Liberal division as ammunition against Trudeau.
His caucus is revolting. Will he call a carbon tax election today?
Once Trudeau tells his MPs what he's deciding to do, those trying to oust him will decide how they're going to respond. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
There is new outrage over a Rogers price hike. All week, our Go Public team has been tracking a flood of complaints over contracts customers say are misleading. Erica Johnson shows us the new push for accountability.
Carol Pickering is among a flood of Rogers customers contacting Go Public after our story about a price hike to TV services.
This is not what I was expecting.
When she called Rogers, she learned language in the service agreement allows the company to increase charges, even though she thought she had a guaranteed monthly price.
I was pretty miffed that I wasn't told about that at the beginning.
Turns out a clause says price guarantees do not apply to rental equipment like TV boxes. In email after email, Rogers customers tell Go Public it's not fair, writing, "When you are retired and on a fixed income, every dollar in your pocket counts. It's a weasel way of doing business. They are acting in bad faith." And now a Rogers call center employee is speaking out, saying he's been told not to give customer refunds, to point to the clause in their contract instead. CBC News isn't using his name because he fears being fired. In an interview, he said, "It sucks. I deal with a lot of retirees and elderly people who say, I budgeted this and now it's going up." This NDP MP says telcos like Rogers, Bell and TELUS shouldn't be allowed to move the goalposts after customers agree to a monthly price. And he says the federal industry minister needs to clamp down.
He has the capability to connect to Rogers and tell them to stop abusing Canadian consumers.
As for Rogers, a spokesperson says most of its TV customers are not impacted by the price increase, that customers can use our free TV app without needing extra boxes and have 10 days to cancel a contract. The NDP's Brian Massey sits on the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. He's urging the committee to request an appearance by Rogers' CEO to explain how he plans to fix the situation. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police in Halifax are looking into a troubling incident over the weekend. A young woman who worked in a local Walmart was found dead inside the store's bakery oven. Here's Kayla Hounsell with what we know so far, and a warning: the story does contain distressing details.
A growing memorial for a young woman found dead inside this Halifax Walmart where she worked. She was just 19. Shockingly found inside an industrial oven in the bakery, large enough for a person to step inside.
This investigation is a very complex investigation.
Police say they were called here around 9:30 Saturday night to investigate a sudden death. They have not said whether it's believed to be criminal. Sources tell CBC News the oven does not lock. Police say the woman had been working that day. They have not released her name.
We're working with occupational health and safety, Nova Scotia medical examiners, determine the cause and manner of death.
A Walmart spokesperson says, "We are heartbroken and our deepest thoughts are with our associate and their family. We extend our sincerest condolences to those who were closest to them." The store has been closed ever since, and grief counseling made available for employees. Members of the maritime Sikh community say the woman was originally from India and came to Canada 2 or 3 years ago.
It's pretty distressing that young people come here with all kind of hopes and dreams, and they are working hard, and then this is what happens.
In Halifax, rumors have been spreading online, prompting police to urge the public not to speculate, warning the investigation could take a significant amount of time.
We want to make sure that they consider the family and the co-workers.
The Nova Scotia Department of Labour says it has issued a stop work order for the bakery and one piece of equipment at this Walmart. Police have cleared the scene here but say their investigation is ongoing. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Coming up, voting day in the U.S. is less than 2 weeks away, and the two presidential candidates are taking shots at each other's character. More on that next. Darius Madavi is here with our BC-wide weather forecast, and we are in for some more rain.
Yes, that's right. And the ground is saturated, so, same as usual. Make sure your storm drains are clear. Be ready for it. But fortunately, this is not anything like last weekend. This isn't an atmospheric river. This is just a normal frontal system coming in, dropping some rain. Nothing unusual for the south coast this time of year. And I just wanted to show this to demonstrate. You can see not a big stream of moisture feeding in, just that one quick wave as we head into the weekend. Some more moisture will pop up at times throughout the weekend, but again, we're not going to see it until early Friday morning here in Vancouver. It will hit a little bit later, a little bit earlier to parts of the island. You can see here, again, some more showers or flurries on the island tomorrow. Then, as we get into Friday, that big wave of precipitation comes in, hitting most of the island by the time we get into Friday morning, and then continuing to work its way onto the mainland as well. So pretty widespread, but nowhere we're expecting it to be too intense and nowhere too consistent. And then some showers will come in and out throughout the weekend as well. For now, we mostly have that moisture feeding up into the northwest and the north coast, although most people in BC tomorrow get a fairly dry day, except maybe parts of the central coast by the water. And then again, you can see that wave move in, some decent snowfall coming to the interior as well. And then that moisture continues to spread out and just comes in and out pretty much throughout the weekend and into early next week. Monday is also looking quite showery for parts of the south coast. In terms of temperatures, pretty seasonal. Not going to see too much change over the next few days. The southern interior may see it fluctuate by 5 degrees or so in terms of those highs. The lows are a little bit more variable, and tomorrow night seems like our chilly night. So you can see tonight, watch Vancouver drop down to around 3 degrees, and then those lows will start to come back up as we head into the weekend, especially as that rain arrives. We'll see those lows come up, with some warmer air coming along with those, along with that precipitation. Lots of sunshine tomorrow across much of BC, although watch out in Whistler where we may have some snow overnight tonight. That transitions into some showers as we head into tomorrow. And in terms of a 5-day forecast down here in Vancouver, once again, some mixed skies tomorrow, but plenty of sunshine. Same thing on Friday. That rain starts overnight Friday into Saturday. Likely to see the worst of it on Saturday or maybe into Saturday, overnight into Sunday. And then some showers basically just come in and out throughout those 2 days as well. We may see another wave of decently more consistent rainfall overnight Sunday into Monday as well. But again, it's really just that precipitation coming in and out. Not expecting it to be all that heavy, at least not consistently, really any of these days.
It is fall.
It is.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
The two main candidates for U.S. president are taking shots at each other's character with less than 2 weeks before voting day. The CBC's Chris Reyes has the latest from the campaign trail.
Today, a rare middle-of-the-day appearance from Kamala Harris from outside the vice president's residence in Washington. She gave a statement reacting to Donald Trump's former chief of staff, former Marine General John Kelly, calling his ex-boss a fascist.
Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in.
Kelly served as White House chief of staff for Trump from 2017 to 2019. Before that, he also served as Secretary of Homeland Security. Talking to the New York Times, Kelly said Trump had admired things about Hitler.
Former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Harris did not take any questions during the brief statement. She challenged voters to use Kelly's statements to help them decide who to vote for.
The bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want?
Meanwhile, Trump continued his personal attacks against Harris as he campaigned in the battleground state of North Carolina. He railed against her recent 60 Minutes interview.
She gave an answer that was so bad that they changed it. They took the entire, it was a long, stupid, she didn't know where the hell she was going. Does she drink? Is she on drugs? I don't know. I have no idea.
Tonight, Harris will try to reach undecided voters in another critical state, Pennsylvania, in a 1 hour and 15-minute town hall hosted by CNN. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
U.S. and South Korean officials now confirm there are North Korean troops in Russia. South Korea first revealed the deployment earlier this month. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says American analysts are now looking into it.
As we continue to look at this, there is evidence that there are DPRK troops, in Russia.
This video appears to show North Korean soldiers receiving uniforms and equipment at a training ground in Russia's Far East. South Korea's spy agency says there are about 3,000 North Korean troops in Russia for training. There are fears the North Korean soldiers could be in the country to help Russia in its war on Ukraine, which would mark a serious escalation of that war. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has left Israel as he continues his latest Middle East tour. Blinken has been focusing on ending Israel's war with Hamas and working out a plan for Gaza once the fighting actually stops. His latest efforts come as fighting between Israel and militants in Gaza and Lebanon intensifies. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more.
Israel attacked the southern Lebanese city of Tyre, a port city, a very historic city, and it gave 3 hours notice for tens of thousands of Lebanese to get out of the way because it intended to carry out airstrikes targeting Hezbollah command centers that it says are in the area, in that part of the city. On the other hand, Hezbollah was firing back into Israel as well. The day started off with sirens going off in Tel Aviv, and then later, other cities across the north were targeted. The Israeli military has some success in shooting down the rockets, but they did damage communities, and some people were injured up there. This is all happening on the same day that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, left Israel, leaving a message behind that the fighting really does need to stop, especially in Gaza, where his point is that Israel has made significant gains in cutting back the number of weapons and fighters that Hamas has down there, the militia group, and it's even managed to get rid of its leader, Yahya Sinwar, last week.
I believe that with Sinwar gone, because he was the primary obstacle to realizing a hostage agreement, there is a real opportunity to bring them home and to accomplish the objective.
The problem is that there are no concrete plans that the Israeli government has articulated on what will happen once the fighting stops. These Americans are pushing Israel to figure out what will happen in Gaza, who will rule Gaza if Israel succeeds in totally defeating Hamas and decimating the organization, who will feed Gazans and deliver food aid, and who will rebuild the territory. Those are all questions that Blinken left behind here in Israel. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, a heartwarming reunion. A one-eyed cat went missing last June when her owners were moving across the country. But now they're back together. You will want to see and hear this.
Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
On November 20th, celebrate the achievements and resilience of women in the workforce with guest host, CBC's Michelle Elliott, at the Dress for Success Luncheon. Tickets at successluncheon.ca, and join guest moderator, CBC's Dan Burritt, at the Alumni UBC webinar, U.S. Elections 2024, November 7th. Register at alumniubc.ca.
Last June, Eve, an 8-year-old one-eyed black cat, was separated from her humans at Coquitlam Lakes while the family was on a cross-country move from BC to Ontario.
Almost a year and a half later, though, the Okanagan Humane Society found her and reunited the family. Eve even made a friend during her solo adventure.
I adopted her from the SPCA in Abbotsford, and she was in Abbotsford and she got hit by a car. That's how she lost her one eye. Me and my family were moving from Abbotsford, BC to Ontario, and we drove down. We made it to the Coquitlam and the connector there. So when we pulled over at the side of the road, she was able to push it and she got out and ran into the bush. So me and my husband ran out after her, and now along that highway, there's that big fence that you have. It's there to keep the wildlife. So we climbed it. The two of us, we climbed it. We had flashlights and we stayed all night looking for her. But obviously, because she's black, she's so hard to see, right? So we were staying there, we stayed there all night looking for her. We went far out into the bushes we could, and we tried to get her back, but there was no luck.
One of our volunteers who had been following the story said, that's it, I'm going to head up there first thing in the morning and set up our apparatus with a great big sign that said, we're the Okanagan Humane Society, we're trying to recover a lost cat.
I'm doing my trucking route up from Abbotsford up to Kamloops, and I saw a post there about a missing kitty. So I thought, well, I'll just stop here and take a quick peek. When I looked over, I'm like, I think I can see some movement inside the cage. So I zoomed in with my camera phone. I could see a black kitty inside the cage. So I hopped out of the truck, ran across the highway and checked on it. And sure enough, kitty's in there.
I honestly didn't really think she was going to make it. So when Romany called me or emailed me and told me she had my cat, I was like, oh my. And then I called her and I was like, do you have my cat? She's black and has one eye. She's like, yes. I was like, oh my God, I just started crying.
I'm more than overjoyed that she has such a loving family. So it just gives me an opportunity now to find another kitty somewhere that's been through some rough times and needs a loving home. So my kitty can have a companion.
Eve, you little scamp.
I know.
Whoa, but how
Happy
cool.
ending.
Community comes together, bunch of people, and you get a cat. A black cat at night. Yeah, good luck. Wow.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6.